Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And so I have a longtime friend with me today, Misty Bailey, and Misty has gone through kind of some different journeys through her homeschool experience, and so she's going to share some of that with you today as well. So Misty is, if you are familiar with the Southeast Homeschool Expo, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. Misty is now the voice behind the scenes, right, of the Facebook page, and she's also one of the convention planners for the Southeast Homeschool Expo now. But before that, and how Misty and I met her when she was doing her blogging, and she had a podcast that she did, which is still up and available. You can check it out. We'll give that to you in the show notes so you can see there. But that's how we first met. She was blogging and talking about up and coming curriculums, and we were one of those up and coming curriculums. And her kids got to check out what we were doing, and she got to write about us and talk about her experience. So that's how we got to know each other. And then here we were already attending that event in Atlanta, and we got to meet again. So kind of fun how the circle keeps coming back, and we get to keep doing things. So when you look, everybody has experience in the homeschool world, right? So Misty is coming from blogging, coming from podcasting, raising her own kids and going through everything. 17 years of homeschooling experience, 3 kids that she's brought from the beginning, and here they are. First one graduated this year, which is really, really good. She started her own local homeschool group. And really for her is to, inspire people, encourage people to discover what's possible in homeschooling. And it's kind of funny because we all have that story about how we got here. And we're going to hear Misty's today as well. So we'll put all the show notes up so you'll have a chance to get to her different web pages that you can do. But first of all, Misty, thank you for being here. Welcome to the podcast. And just super excited to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me come on, even though I'm not a podcaster anymore or in that world. I'm excited to be here.
That's all right. Yeah, that's right. Kind of like it'd be back into kind of getting you back up. I used to be in a rock band, right? And there's a band that this was wow, 20 years ago now when I was playing in the band. But there's a group that I know, and they play based out of Orlando, Florida. And if I'm ever in the Orlando area and they're playing, they let me pop on stage with them and do a couple songs with them, right? So it's kind of funny because it's like, you get to kind of relive all that, right? So this will be like, we'll relive those podcasting days. This will kind of get you going again. But let's back up all the way to the beginning of homeschooling. So how did kind of like you're homeschooling your daughter, and what kind of got you to the point where it's like, hey, you know what, this is where we want to go, and kind of walk us through the journey, because then all of your kids were homeschooled that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, quite frankly, God told us to homeschool. I never wanted to, never planned to. I had full plans on being a public school teacher. I was working in the public school system as a preschool teacher and became pregnant with my middle, and childcare was just super expensive. So I quit my job and decided to stay home and run an in-home daycare until my kids were in school. And then I was going to go back to teaching. That was my plan all along. I was going to go back to teaching. But God, in his wonderful ways, kept putting these awesome families who homeschooled in front of us. Literally, we would just be out and about, and these people would come around us, and I'd be like, oh, their kids are so nice, so polite. Start talking to them. They homeschooled. We would just come into random families who homeschooled. And this was the early 2000s. So it wasn't like homeschooling was as popular as it is now. And I saw a difference in these people and how they lived their lives. I saw a fruit, I saw a light, and I wanted that for my family. I knew that God was just clearly calling us to live a life that was set apart, and it was different. It wasn't easy. My husband was not on board at all at first. So Allison went on to school, and then just different things happened. Her first year of public school, preschool, and my husband said, if you can teach her to read, then pull her out. So we pulled her out over Christmas break, and before the end of the school year, she was reading, and we haven't looked back. It's been amazing. She just graduated this past spring, and she's doing well in college. My middle is a junior. She's taking dual enrollment classes at our local college campus. She's also doing well, and my youngest is in 6th grade. And we plan on homeschooling all of them all the way through. It's been a wonderful journey, and I'm so very thankful for it.
Wow, that's awesome. So we started fourth grade and second grade were the years that my kids started, and we just graduated one this year, which is really awesome. But it's funny because we told my daughter, because her brother was home a year before her, and she was like, I want to homeschool, I want to homeschool. So we told her, we said, okay, honey, you learn how to read and you can homeschool. So we had it the reverse. We told her, we let the teachers do it at school. You teach them how to read, and she was just all over that. Like, she was determined she was going to read, and by the end of the year she was reading, and so home she came. So worked out great. Yeah, so that's funny. So a little bit kind of similar but different at the same time, right? In the idea of reading, and here how we go. And same
Yeah.
thing, we haven't looked back. It's just so awesome. So, we met through your blogs and having your kids use our courses, and got to find out about their experience and how it went. But now that you're no longer blogging, you have a bit of that entrepreneurial kind of, flair to you, right? And so there's always something else going on, and you're managing a family, you're managing a business, you're managing, being a spouse, and you're also managing being a homeschool mom all at the same time. So, typically you've got that kind of entrepreneurial flair about you, right? So, now you're working with the homeschool, the homeschool expo, right? So tell us about that. How did you end up there? Kind of what happened? What had you decide maybe there was time to move on from the blogging and podcasting and to get into this next venture of your life?
Yeah, so I blogged, well, I ran an in-home daycare for 7 years, and I loved it. It was great. It was wonderful. And that's what I was doing when we first started homeschooling. But as when my youngest was born and my girls became school age, I realized like this was going to be too much. Like homeschooling them, especially as my youngest was becoming older, I was like, it was going to be way too much. So I started looking into this website. It was called Upwork, or Odesk at the time. It's Upwork now. And I just started like writing articles. Started writing articles, making a little bit of money on the side, and then started blogging. And so in the midst of that, I actually met Mark and started with the Southeast Homeschool Expo, and started writing blogs for the expo. And so over the course of like a year, I just kind of started launching the blog, writing articles, managing the Southeast Homeschool Expo social media, and just slowly started like transitioning into working online as my youngest daycare kids were transitioning into kindergarten. So I made that shift from working in daycare to slowly transitioning into replacing some of that income with an online business. So I did that. And then with the blog, slowly making money, and the podcast, slowly making money. So I blogged and podcasted from 2014 to 2020, and was also in that time managing social media for the expo and some other homeschool companies. And I loved it. I love blogging, loved podcasting. But the climate of 2020 was not the best for the
Right.
online space. And my kids were also getting older, and they didn't necessarily like, being the center of attention on social media. And I realized it was kind of a lot of pressure on them too, and I didn't fully understand that. So the girl who had my job, Jennifer Hen, she kind of helped Mark ran the convention. She stepped away from that position, and he offered it to me, and I took it. So I got to plan an in-person convention in 2020, which, let me just say, was like super not fun. In the midst of everything. But I did it, and I've really enjoyed it. So I also help run social media for Apologia and Masterpiece Society. So I have three part-time jobs that work themselves together into a full-time job. But it's great. I mean, my kids are no longer, they no longer feel that pressure of, being moms. Um, Guru. I don't know if that's the right word, but they're no longer, the part of my work in that sense.
Right.
And I get to kind of leave work at work. And it's been great. I love working with the expo. I love getting to go to Atlanta every year and meet the families, and bring great exhibitors and great speakers into the homeschool market. And it's just been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, and I'm very thankful for it.
That's awesome. You just, as you're mentioning all those things that you're doing, right? 3 part-time jobs, 3 kids,
Yes.
right? And everybody's, homeschooling, you're working from home. And then, and it's interesting how the pandemic really did, in 2020, it put everybody at
Mhm.
home,
Yes.
and for a while, it was interesting to watch because for a while, all of a sudden, everybody was like, oh my gosh, this working at home thing is super cool,
Mhm.
right? Now, I've been doing this for years and years and years. And it was funny when when they first came out and people were like, well, what's your response to COVID? And I was like, what response? We're going to keep doing what we've already been doing, right? There's nothing, our response is we're going to keep doing what we're doing, right? That was our response. But, one of the things that, I kind of hear just so many different things going on and working online and, you're able to, manage it all, and it's really, really awesome. And I think that homeschool parents have figured that out, because homeschool moms and dads, they figured out how to know when to be dad, when to be mom, when to be homeschool
Mhm.
provider, when to be teacher, when to be business person, when to be family, all the different things, when to be active in the community, how to manage all that. And it's funny, of all the things, I saw an article, oh my gosh, I think it was in the last month. And I saw this article from Zoom, and Zoom was requesting that their staff come back to the office. And even this amazing online platform that they use, that we're using right now, right? But they've even said, it's time for you guys to come back to the office. So they've taken, so it's kind of funny to see that. But you know, you've managed to make it work. And I think oftentimes too, we see, families that are new to homeschooling, and I can always tell them in the convention, I know they walk down the hallway and their eyes are just big, and they've got that kind of, oh my gosh, overwhelm. And some of the conventions, so many vendors, there's so much going on, and it can be that kind of deer in the headlight kind of look. And, it's like, because it really does come back to, well, how do you manage it all and how do you make it all work? And when you look out in the world beyond homeschooling, sometimes it looks like it's hard to make it work and people are struggling with that. So, what's your secret? How do you make it all work when other people struggle with it?
Yeah, so I can elaborate on any of these that you want me to, but I'm not going to elaborate unless you tell me to for the sake of time.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I don't I don't do things perfectly. And my kids, I take my kids with me to Atlanta every year, and I always tell all the parents, I'm like, if you want to know any of my mistakes, you can go see any of my children and you can ask them and they will tell you what mom has done right and what mom has done wrong, because I have done a lot of things wrong and I don't balance things perfectly. And I think that is one misconception that a lot of people have whenever they think of moms who work at home or work in homeschool, is that, they do balance everything well and that they do manage it all, because we don't manage everything well at all. There's always going to be balls that drop, and there are always going to be things that are not done perfectly. And I've made mistakes, and it's hard. It is not easy at all. But a few things that did help me, particularly through the years, that I will say consistently I have always done and tried to do, that helped me manage it all to some extent, is I've always had a daily routine. So there's always been some sort of routine to our days. Now, that routine has varied. It has varied every year from year to year, depending on the age of my kids, depending on what season of work I'm in, where my husband's at and his work, what his work hours are. No routine has been like stuck in stone, that we've not been able to shift from it. There has to be some ebb and flow in your days, and you can't be like a strict, um, you know, time manager, where you have like alarm set for every hour of your day, but there has to be some sort of a routine to your day, where you get up, you start school, an ebb and flow to your day type of thing. And so we've always had some sort of a routine to our day. We've always had set school and work hours. So again, those things have shifted, but I've always gotten up 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and tried to get work done before the kids get up. So like right now, I might get up and work, from 5 to 8. And I work 5 to 8 Monday through Saturday. So right there, that's 18 hours every morning, every day that I can knock out work before my kids are sometimes up before then, but before the kids are even like up and moving, and then I might work 1 to 3 halfway through the day, or work some evenings. But my work hours have almost always been first things in the morning, try to knock as much stuff out as possible. And then once
Mm.
school starts, try not to work. Like right now I'm working, we're recording this at 11 o'clock in the afternoon, but I've only got one kid
Right.
left at home, and he's outside playing right now. So, this is not typical, but, we always do try to have like work and school hours that are separate. Again, it's hard, but I've always tried to do that. And then also when my kids were younger, I brought in outside help. Like I would bring in, I hired a high school student um to come in like one day every week and just do messy arts and crafts with my girls whenever Daniel was a baby. And they loved it. They still talk about it. And that high school student is now she has a 3-year old that my son absolutely loves. And like she's a good friend of mine, and my girls still remember it. And she's like a mentor to my girls. But like she built that relationship with my girls when they were younger. And she came in, one day a week and would do all of those messy things with my kids, or I would fold laundry or take a nap, because I needed that time, to have one-on-one with him when he was little, or to run errands or do different things. And I was never afraid to ask for help. And I think that's one thing that moms sometimes are afraid to do. But I needed that. And as the kids got older, that outside help that I might have looked a little bit different. But don't be afraid to ask for help. Swap for help. If you're working, don't be afraid to ask a mom to take one of your kids on a field trip because you have to work. And then do the same for somebody else. I think those are things that are really important that helped me have that little bit of balance to be able to do it.
Oh, I like that. So there's a schedule, right? And within the schedule, it's, and I think oftentimes it's like, it's a schedule. Schedules change, right? And we have a plan,
Mhm.
and that's why we have a plan. So we have an outline of what it's going to do, and it can change, and things can we kind of move inside of it. But I like that you really saying it's like you're going to make mistakes. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
perfect, and I think that's great, especially because we get to model that for our kids. We get to let them know it is okay to make mistakes, and how often it's like if kids are comfortable with that, then they can be comfortable with that and they can make mistakes and they can actually be able to grow and learn from them. And it's so funny because I ask students this all the time, and it's like, okay, so how many of you are going to make a mistake? In the next week or so, right? Everybody raises their hand, right? And and you get back to the question, then why is it that everything has to be perfect when you know that it's not going to be, right? It's almost, there's a illogicness to it, right? That comes out. So really, that's really awesome. And then when you're inside of that schedule and you're doing the things and it's time to work, it's time to play, it's time for school, like all those different things in there. So that's I think that's really awesome. And then the last piece was not being asking for help. And same, it's like being able to be part of the community. And that's the great thing about homeschooling is that there's so many of us that are there and willing to help and share ideas. And it's funny. So, the person that's brand new to homeschooling sometimes has a great idea for somebody that's been doing it for 10 or 15 years. And then vice versa. The 10 or 15-year-old veterans, 10 or 15-year veterans have that great advice for those new people as well. So it's really great. So it's like you've managed to have a career, and I think you kind of touched on this too about having your time and having the schedule. But have you ever it's like because I know for myself, it's like, and when I look, and it's like I kind of get focused on something, I have a project that gets done, and I kind of disappear into the project sometimes. And my kids know that, and they're kind of like, okay, Dad, we know, and I just let them know. It's like, okay, guys, look, especially August time of year, that's when our classes are getting ready to start, and it's kind of got people conditioned. It's like they know life is crazy, this time of year, right? But for when you're doing that, and for somebody that does want to have a career, and they are still, whether they're doing it because they just really want to have a career, they're doing it because they need to provide income for the family. How for parents that are trying to juggle that career and be a homeschool for them at the same time. And I know you touched on it with the schedules and not being perfect, but is there anything else that you would share with parents when it comes to the career itself that how do they juggle all that?
Yeah, so I have two things for this. And the first is, I had a job at one point, over the last couple years that I loved the job, but the job was way more stressful and more work and took more from our family than what it was worth. And so if at any time, I think we have to make sure that if you're working for a company, or if at any time that career does there's no work-life balance, there isn't that there, and you feel like it is taking a toll on your mental health or your family's health or your homeschooling, that that's a job that God's put before you to do first, don't be afraid to walk away. Because I've always wanted to work. I've always loved, my job. I've always loved being able to help and encourage homeschool families, and it was really hard to walk away from that, but God ended up providing so much more later. And so, don't be afraid to do that, to do what's best for your family. So I do want to say that, because I do sometimes think that there is guilt for moms who want to work and
Right.
homeschool. I do think sometimes there is guilt for that. But make sure that you're working for a company that does prioritize work-life balance. Or, if you're working for yourself, don't be afraid to also, you know, don't get head first into work that you lose, that love for that first job, which is your family, which is hard sometimes. And going along with that, don't be afraid to say no. No to so many other outside things. Say no and don't feel guilty about it. Whenever you're home, and, when your kids are little, or people think that you're home and you're working and, you're homeschooling your kids, there's a lot of times when people will ask you to do outside things like run a co-op or teach a class, or babysit their kids, or help with this ministry at church. And these are all good and wonderful things. But you're working, you're homeschooling, you're doing all of these other things, and you feel guilty again for saying no to some of these things. But when you're saying yes to those outside things, you are saying no to homeschooling, you are saying no to work, and you are saying no to those first jobs that you
Mm.
actually do have. So I think that was really, really hard for me when it comes to balancing it all that you talked about before, was the saying no to all of the outside things and not feeling guilty about it. So make sure your yeses are your best yeses. I think that was very, very hard for me when it comes to having a career and working and homeschooling, is making sure what I was saying yes to was the best yes, whether it was the employer that I was working for, whether it was the ministries that, was set before me. For me, my ministry is my homeschool group, running that's where I felt my ministry was, and so that was the outside ministry that I focused on, but
Wow.
find out what your best yes is, and focus on that, and don't feel bad about it, about saying no to other things.
Right. Yeah, that kind of makes me think about this too, because when you're there is that time to say no, right?
Mhm.
And there are other things we take on, and as the kids get older, things change, our schedules change, the way we're going to do things change, right? And oftentimes there are like you said, there's so many different opportunities that come in, and
Yeah.
so many different things that you can do. And so I mean, it just becomes like, we I think we kind of get into that space of like, well, we need to do all of it, you
Yeah,
know
you can't.
right. And knowing that we can't, and still at the same time thinking that we have to, those things bump into each other. It's almost like,
Mhm.
the two bulls running into each other, right? Both heads down and their horns up, and here we go. So, it's like there's the things that there is, how do you know when it's time to let go of something? It's kind of like, and then what do you hold on to? So when it comes to homeschooling and what's important, how do you know? Like, what do you recommend for people? Like, if there's something to let go of, or how would they know to hold on to? How would people know what's the best thing to do?
Yeah. So I think for me, I look back on when my kids were little, and I put so much pressure on myself. I think as homeschool moms, we have so many hats to wear. We have mom, we have spouse, we have teacher, we have friend, we have, if we're working, we have all of these different things. And society tells us, we can do it all. We can do all of these things, but we can't. We really, really can't. And I think that I had so much guilt for working, for trying to do it all, for I don't know, so many different things. And I think if I could go back to when my kids were little, I would focus more on the messy projects, on the enjoying my kids. I would have stressed a lot less about what other people thought of me.
Mhm.
I would have stressed a lot about trying to do all of the outside things and trying to have worrying about when my kids read or whether or not they knew um, little silly facts you think your people are going to drill your kids on. Do you know what I mean? I would
Yeah.
worry a lot less about that. I would have let go of those things and I would have read a lot more books. I
Mm.
would have done more nature walks. I would have just really enjoyed my kids more. I think that's what I would have focused a lot more on, and I would have let go of all of the expectations I let other people put on me for whatever reason. And I would have just really enjoyed my kids and given myself a lot more grace if I had it to do over again.
Wow. You made me think about something, because oftentimes we talk about, and I've heard lots of people say this before, it's like the why. Why are you
Hmm.
homeschooling?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you get to the why, you know why you're homeschooling,
Hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
you're the one that you made that decision. And then you really pointed to it. Like there's the expectations that sometimes others put on us. But if it's not in alignment with why we're doing this, that's another place you can kind of look to see, yeah, you know what? That doesn't fit with what we're doing. But then we've got to practice some skills, that ability to say no. It's like, nope, that doesn't work for me. And we're not going to be, thank you, but we're not going to be doing that. And knowing that it's time, there are times that things are going to change and you can't do it all. And how do you kind of move through that? But it's great because you go back to that, well, why are we doing this? And I could hear it when you were speaking. It was about time with your kids and being able to
Hmm.
enjoy nature and enjoy the things that they develop that love for learning, which is and I think everybody, we want that for our kids. Like they really enjoy what they're learning about and those kind of things that can take them into their adult lives that they can pass on to their kids. So it's just really, really awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's never too late either. Like
Right.
I realized all of this stuff, whenever the girls they weren't too old, and they've made comments that, Daniel's education looks different than theirs. But I loosened up, once they were probably middle school ages, I loosened up a lot more and let go of a lot of that comparison and a lot of that stress and a lot of that pressure, I put on myself. So it's never too late to change course. It's never too late to focus on what's really important and to change your goals for education and your goals for homeschooling um and to just change, your
Yeah.
philosophies or just the way that you do things, you know.
Right. Well, that's really good. And with the change comes the balance, right? And how you balance things and how you keep things in balance, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think it's kind of funny because I think people sometimes think, well, it's not possible. Like, is it really exist? Like, is it even real that you can actually balance things when working and homeschooling and having it all happen? What do you say to people that they have that, like, is that even possible?
I don't think there really is. I don't think balance fully exists in the realm that what a lot of people think that balance does. I think it comes down to seasons. I really think it's seasons. I think when I tried to balance all of the things on a day-to-day basis, I burnt myself out, I burnt my kids out, and I zapped every bit of joy out of our homeschool, out of our day-to-day lives. I couldn't do it all. I couldn't work and give everything to work and then also give everything to school and everything to my husband and everything to my community and to my friends and to my church. I couldn't do that. I couldn't. There's only one of me, and my health, suffered, my mental health, my physical health, because I couldn't do it all. But
Mm.
once I realized that, and once I took that weight off of my shoulders and I handed it over to God, and I was like, I let it go. And I think COVID really opened my eyes to a lot of different things. I think it opened people's eyes all around, to a lot
Absolutely.
of things.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it woke us up in a lot of ways. But once I realized that, all of that, then I kind of recognize more the seasons, the ebbs and flows to our lives. And that is kind of how we live our lives now. There are seasons. There are seasons whenever my work is really crazy. So like for us, that's during the summer. With the expo, things are absolutely crazy, as you can imagine.
Right.
The expo is our crazy season. That's mom's very, very busy season for work. And then we really focus in on the school during the fall. That's like where, that's what works best for us. Our rest season, family wise, is winter. Um, so we've kind of found that's our balance. That's what works best for us. Now, that doesn't mean that that's not what's going to work best for everybody, for everybody else. But I think balance, the way that people look at it, is a myth. I think you have to find the balance for you. You have to find what works best for your life and for your family. And I think we try too much to just fit everything into a method, or fit everything into a box, or fit everything into this perfect routine or perfect schedule or perfect checklist. And that's not how our lives are meant to be lived. And that's not how life works. So I don't know if that's the right answer for what exactly you're
I think
looking
it's a
for,
great. No, I
but
wasn't looking for anything. Just it's curious because because here's I can hear balance in what you're saying,
yeah,
right? And it's and it's like, and there's the things you can manage. There's things God can manage, right? It's like you
exactly.
balance it, right? You balance that. I discovered a nutrition program
Mhm.
gosh, 8 months ago, right? And I was really struggling with my weight and my health, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do, right? And the whole nutrition program is based on seasons. Like
Mhm.
what's available during this season? What should you be eating? Like, and not like what you should be eating. It's like, what can you eat? Right. This is what would be available at this point in time. And then in the next season, next thing I knew, I was like 20 pounds later. And I thought, oh my gosh, and I feel great. And all these great things, no more blood pressure medicine. I'm like, yay, so so
Yeah.
things, but that was the balance. It was the seasons, just like as you said that as well. So I think there's something to that. I think you're definitely onto something there. So that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I want to make sure everybody has websites to get to you. So one is if they want to go back and they want to see your blogs, because you've got a huge history of writing blogs that make a difference. People can find out your podcast as well. And that's findingjoyinthejourney.net. And we'll make sure we put that in the show notes as well, for people can find that. And then if people want to find out about the Southeast Homeschool Expo, it's southeasthomeschoolexpo.com. And we'll put your name up there too, because then they can reach you directly /Misty Bailey, Misty-Bailey. We'll put that in the show notes. So if they want to get more information about the expo, come and find out what's happening there. And it's usually towards the end of July, early August in Atlanta, Georgia. And is that about the same time each year? I think it's usually like the last weekend in July. That sounds
Yep.
right? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. I know I've been a few times, and we've had one of our other teachers, Mr. Henderson, go. Mr. H, he's been a few times. So it's great. So, we love being there and get out to be able to see people. So that's awesome. Well, Misty, thanks for making your day work. I know you kind of change your schedule around a little bit, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you got a young person outside playing right now. It's kind of like, go ahead, mom, do your thing, right? So
I think
you'll
I
be
think
happy
he likes
with
the
them.
break.
I figured. Oh, that's good. Very good. Well, what we'll do is, if it's okay with you, is as we get kind of into the season, into the expo season and the convention season, let's get back together again. We can talk a little more about some of the things you've got coming up new for what's happening in Atlanta, and we'll get back together and chat again.
That's perfect. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Very good. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in to A Plus Parents, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.